The NFC North has seen some big changes over the last year and this offseason, and the draft market has made some big reactions. Some of those reactions have been wrong, though, and they're leaving attractive value plays on the board for almost every team in this division. Want to know which NFC North players you should be targeting and who you should leave for someone else? We're hitting every player you're going to care about on an all-new Draft Sharks podcast right now. Matt Schauf and Jared Small of DraftSharks.com here to preview the NFC North. Just one episode for us this week as opposed to our usual two. My buddy Jared here's dealing with a little bit of illness. How are you feeling today, Jared?
Good enough to talk about the NFC North. Too much intrigue in this division. We couldn't let a little cold get in the way.
I had to tell Jared that we could talk about his Chicago Bears this year just to make sure he's feeling well enough to do this pod recording with me. So let's start with that team, just going alphabetically, not by favorites here. Chicago Bears, first of all, 2024 left a lot of room for improvement this year, right?
For sure. This was a dysfunctional offense, especially considering the talent. They had good skill position talent players. The O-line was not bad. I was kind of surprised when I dug into it.
Same.
It wasn't a great O-line, but it definitely wasn't a major issue. The Bears last year were 28th in points scored, 32nd in total yards, 32nd in yards per play. Caleb Williams definitely deserves some of the blame for that, and we'll get into him and what he needs to improve on when we get to talking about Caleb Williams. But I think the scheme and play calling under the previous coaching staff was the biggest issue here, and luckily they totally cleaned house there.
You can look at pretty much any measure and realize that Caleb Williams didn't play great last year. The thing we'll never know is how much of that was stepping into this team that probably didn't have a very good coaching staff. It doesn't sound like he had a whole lot of support. It's got to be tough to be a rookie quarterback in the NFL and not have a good support system. What he did have is surrounding talent. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, what is new this year is, of course, that coaching staff got replaced. The new head coach is Ben Johnson, who was Detroit's offensive coordinator for the past 3 years. Those Lions teams ranked fifth, and first in scoring. They ranked 4th, 3rd, and 2nd in total yards. They ranked 7th, 5th, and 3rd in DVOA. So it is not hard to see what the Bears liked about Ben Johnson and making him the new head coach. Of course, last year's Bears, 27th in DVOA, just another category where that offense looked bad. The offensive coordinator is Declan Doyle. It's his first time as the OC, so we don't really know much about him other than Ben Johnson brought him in, so likes him, trusts him to be his offensive coordinator. The team also added some new players to the offense, plenty of new players, really. They drafted Colston Loveland, the tight end, 10th overall, drafted Luther Burden in round 2, a wide receiver, also picked up some new offensive linemen, traded for Rams guard Jonah Jackson, traded for Chiefs guard Joe Thuney, drafted offensive tackle Ozzie Trapillo in round 2. And like you said, I was a little bit surprised that the O-line didn't rate worse last year. 15th in pass block win rate, according to ESPN, 8th in run block win rate. So the Bears clearly decided that they needed to upgrade some spots. It's possible that Caleb Williams made that group look worse than it really was.
He definitely did. We'll get to that when we talk about Caleb Williams. They also signed center Drew Dahlman, who was 4th among 32 qualifying centers in PFF grades last year. So brand new interior of the offensive line. The O-line wasn't bad last year, but I think it should be better this year. They do lose Keenan Allen. He finished 2nd on this team with 121 targets, 21.4% of the Bears' total targets. So quite a bit of volume left over to go around. It's interesting that Ben Johnson comes in and he spends his first 2 draft picks on skill position players for a team that wasn't like desperate for skill position talent. I don't think that was this team's biggest need, either tight end or wide receiver. So interesting that Ben Johnson went out and added those 2 guys. I think it makes this offense even more interesting, but also difficult to project heading into 2025.
Yeah, it certainly tells us that we don't know exactly how much input the new head coach had in picking the players, but at the very least, you have to assume that the Bears did not pick these players without talking to Ben Johnson quite a bit about them. So what we can assume here is that Ben Johnson very much likes the talent on Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. The fact that they added those 2 pieces to this offense that's already in pretty good shape in terms of offensive skill talent for the passing game, that all tells me that we should expect a fair amount of passing volume for this team. We'll see exactly what that run-pass split looks like, but it's an offense that looks like it's built to throw the ball plenty.
For sure, which would obviously be a change from what Ben Johnson did in Detroit. You know, his 3 Lions teams, 19th, 22nd, and 26th in pass rate. But those teams were built to run with strong backfields. They were also good teams that were winning a lot of games, which pushed them further towards the pass. Much different personnel in Chicago. Definitely an offense that is built more to throw. The best talent on this offense is in the pass catching core. So we're currently projecting the Bears at 59% pass, which will be way higher than Ben Johnson's offenses in Detroit. And also, it's definitely in the top half of the league of our pass rate projections.
And of course, Ben Johnson's now running the show for this team as opposed to working under Dan Campbell, who I assume is a pretty strong influence on whatever the team's going to do back in Detroit. Looking at player targets, I've talked about him enough that anybody who watches our show, listens to it regularly, probably knows the first player I'm going to bring up. It's DJ Moore at his wide receiver 22 ADP. I think that wide receiver 22 is much closer to his fantasy floor across formats this year than it is to his ceiling. I know that the concern for people is it's a new coach. He drafted Colson Loveland. He drafted Luther Burden. How do we know how he feels about DJ Moore? So my counter is the only guy that we really know about in this Chicago pass offense is DJ Moore, who has produced over and over again on bad offenses with bad quarterbacks in Carolina, in Chicago, put up wide receiver 1 level numbers with Justin Fields. Rather than me trying to figure out for sure what the target share is going to be, I'm just going to say, hey, if all I have to do is spend a low wide receiver 2 price on this experienced wide receiver who's still prime aged, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll let the rest of the stuff figure itself out.
Yep, I'm in on DJ Moore too, but not quite as high as you are. He is wide receiver 17 in our half PPR ranking compared to the wide receiver 22 ADP. So I do think he's a value. Last year was not great for DJ Moore. He posted career lows in yards per route run, in PFF receiving grade. He was 60th among 84 qualifying receivers in yards per route, 42nd in PFF receiving grade. I'm going to say this with Caleb Williams too. I think all these Bears deserve almost a total mulligan for last season because it was just such a dysfunctional offense. I think the coaching staff was largely to blame. I'm willing to bet on a DJ Moore bounce back. Like you said, Matt, he is not at an age where we should be worried about decline yet. And this is a guy who just has consistently drawn strong target shares. If you look at his target share starting in 2021, 27.2%, 25.8%, 26.5%, and then 24.7%. So those are wide receiver 1 level target shares. Now, he probably is facing more target competition this year than he did in any of those seasons, and we're not projecting him to even get to 24.5% target share, but he can get a 22, 23% target share in a passing game that should be more efficient in Williams' second season under Ben Johnson. I think if DJ Moore can get that type of target share again, 22, 23%, he's a pretty good bet to pay off his current ADP.
Yeah, I think that's a fair level to project him at. I think it's possible that he gets more than that. So we have him fairly projected. He's ahead of the market price. Very easy buy for me. And I think if you find yourself liking Caleb Williams and liking the Bears offense in general, but hesitant on DJ Moore, you should try to work past that, especially if you're drafting right now and spreading things around. At least incorporate some DJ Moore, and we'll see what happens. I'll let you mention the second target, Jared, because I think it's probably a player that we share.
Well, now you're going to make me guess who that is.
That's fun.
Roschon Johnson?
You got it.
I like Roschon Johnson. He's RB52 in ADP on Underdog right now, RB49 in our rankings. His ceiling is higher than most of the other running backs in that tier. Now, again, for Roschon Johnson, last year was not very good in terms of raw production or efficiency. But you go back to his 2023 rookie campaign, 4.3 yards per carry, 34 catches. He was a pretty intriguing college prospect, too. He sat behind some really talented players at Texas like Bijan Robinson, but a lot of Roschon Johnson's per carry metrics, even the advanced stuff, the tackle breaking, the elusiveness, that type of stuff was really strong. He does have some pass catching ability too, as he showed in that rookie season, catching 34 balls. I think this is a better player than what we saw last year. I have serious questions about DeAndre Swift as a runner and how Ben Johnson thinks about DeAndre Swift. We'll get to him, I think, when we talk about the fades, I assume, or maybe we'll see how you feel about him, Matt. But everything about Ben Johnson, look at his Detroit backfields. 2022, again, that was the season he had DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams split work. Williams was the clear lead ball carrier. Swift did a lot of the pass catching the last 2 seasons. Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery kind of in the same type of workload split, right? Montgomery more the early down between the tackles type. Gibbs getting plenty of carries, but also doing most of the passing down stuff. So there's a chance that Roschon Johnson plays the Jamal Williams, David Montgomery type of role in this offense. And that would mean significant carry volume, maybe the primary goal line role. So I think Roschon Johnson at a RB49 ADP, at minimum, he's a nice handcuff. But I think there's a decent chance he gets enough work to have standalone fantasy value, even if DeAndre Swift stays healthy.
I totally agree. Starting with the college stuff, I'll point out with a lot of players that if they're playing behind somebody on their college team that probably doesn't portend well for their NFL career. That's different when Bijan Robinson is leading your backfield. That guy is a stud in the NFL as well. So I'm not dinging Roschon Johnson for playing behind him in college. I think on the other side of that, it's impressive that Roschon Johnson got as much work as he did. Also, for a guy who arrived in college as a dual threat quarterback. So he wasn't even a running back coming into college. He was a decent, at least, college profile, came into the NFL. And like you said, we haven't seen a whole lot so far. It's been a bad coaching staff. Before the NFL draft, I was not really into Roschon Johnson because I was expecting these Bears to add something to the backfield. They waited until round 7 to do that. Drafted Kyle Monangai at that point. We'll see if that's a player they like, a player who has upside this year. But for now, Roschon Johnson has a path to earn work, and we'll watch and see what happens in training camp. But like you said, it's only 1 year of evidence that we have with DeAndre Swift playing for Ben Johnson. We don't know how much of that was Ben Johnson, how much of it was Dan Campbell, but we should assume that the OC had a pretty heavy hand in deciding how the ball was distributed on that team. And for Jamal Williams to so clearly lead the carries over DeAndre Swift that year certainly doesn't say any good things about Swift. We can quibble over how much bad it says, but it definitely doesn't say good things. So to me, there's opportunity, and we'll see what the summer says for where that opportunity goes or whether we're overrating it. Do you have any other targets among Bears?
Yeah. I'm still in on Caleb Williams. His ADP is now sunk to quarterback 12. There was a time a couple of months ago where he was like quarterback 8, quarterback 9. It's a tight range there. These guys are moving every day, really, and so many drafts going off on underdog. But I'm in on Caleb at a quarterback 12 ADP. We have him quarterback 11 in our rankings. He's in that big tier. Quarterback 6 to quarterback 14 for us is just one giant tier at quarterback. So Caleb Williams right in the middle of that. I think he has one of the higher ceilings in that tier. I think he's a guy that can push for that quarterback 6, quarterback 7 finish because I think he's a talented passer. He's obviously in a much better situation now, both in terms of coaching and even his weaponry is a bit better than it was last year. The other thing about Caleb Williams is this guy is going to add some value with his legs. He ran 82 times for 483 yards last year. Those were both 7th highest among quarterbacks. So I think there's enough passing plus rushing upside here for Williams to pretty handily beat his current ADP.
He's still not a target for me, but I'm fine with him at QB 12, especially if I already have DJ Moore on my best ball team. I'll give Caleb Williams a look in that range. I'll consider him even stronger if he slides past ADP. Rome Odunze is kind of similar in that he's not a target, but I'm fine with him at a low wide receiver 3 cost, wide receiver 33. I'd be more interested if they hadn't drafted Luther Burden in round 2. Of course, his ADP would probably be at least a little bit higher as well if they didn't draft Burden.
It's a little scary for me to be out on Rome Odunze, but he's just a guy I have trouble drafting. You look at our rankings, he's wide receiver 38 in our half PPR rankings, wide receiver 33 in ADP. So we do have him a bit overvalued. It's not much to like about his rookie season. Rome Odunze ran the 7th most pass routes among all wide receivers last year. Playing time opportunity was not a problem. He finished 48th among receivers in PPR points. If you look at his ranks among 84 wide receivers with 50-plus targets last year, 59th in targets per route run. So he did not draw volume at a strong level. He was 70th in yards per route run, 63rd in PFF receiving grade. Now, I've said for Caleb Williams and Roschon Johnson that we should be giving these guys a bit of a mulligan for what went on in Chicago last year. So I'm definitely trying to keep that in mind. But to me, the discount's just not quite enough on Odunze right now for how disappointing a rookie season he had.
I agree. I was hoping that he was going to be in wide receiver 4 range because I like the upside, but I think he's at least fairly valued and maybe overvalued. And part of it is how much I like DJ Moore. So how much room is there for the next guy? I think if you're betting on Rome Odunze at cost, you have to bet against DJ Moore, or at least be entertaining the possibility of an injury to DJ Moore and assuming that Odunze takes over that top target role if DJ Moore goes down. That's just not a bet that I care to make a whole lot at the level where Odunze is going. DeAndre Swift, also kind of in a similar boat. I'm not out on him at RB25. I'm not targeting him at RB25. I'm probably fading a little bit more than I am targeting, but he's going in a range where I'm like, that's fine. If I need a running back right there, DeAndre Swift's okay.
Yeah, I almost wish he was going higher so I could just fade him because he's not really a guy I want to draft. I will say, if you're getting into a full PPR league and you can get him at something close to RB25, I think he's a much better pick there because I think at minimum, he's going to control passing down work for this team. The carries, again, I think are totally up for grabs. We talked about the fact that Swift averaged just 7.1 carries per game under Ben Johnson in 2022. And really, he did nothing last year to deserve more rushing work this season. He averaged a career low 3.8 yards per carry last year. And Swift ranked dead last among 47 qualifying running backs in rush yards over expected per attempt last year, negative 0.7 yards. So basically, he was gaining fewer yards than expected based on the blocking in front of him last year. He was just a really inefficient runner. So that's why I think there's an opportunity for Roschon Johnson to claim a pretty big rushing role in this backfield.
And that's what he's been. DeAndre Swift was a second-round pick when he entered the league, but he's just been a meh runner since he joined the league across multiple teams, even in the flashiest season rushing with Philadelphia. That team then let him walk for bigger money in Chicago after the season. He's not a player that I want to bet on. We'll watch this summer, see if there are any signals that maybe Ben Johnson does like him better than we think, and he's in for more work. But for now, he's somebody who's just kind of there. Luther Burden is similar. I'm really not interested for redraft, but he's also going at wide receiver 57, so I can't tell you that he's a terrible pick if you want to target him.
Yeah, and going back to the point you were making on DeAndre Swift, seeing what happens in August, this is an offense I'm just very open to changing my mind on based on what we see and hear in August, because there are so many moving pieces when you talk about Luther Burden and Colson Loveland joining this pass catching core in the brand new coaching staff. Burden's someone I want to take some shots on at his wide receiver 57 ADP. I think there's plenty of upside at that price. He was the 39th overall pick of this spring's draft. Had a really up and down college career, an incredible 2023 sophomore season in terms of both raw production and market shares, but then a really bad 2024 season. I do think the draft capital was good. It was about what we expected. I think landing with Ben Johnson was excellent for Luther Burden. Needing manufactured touches is probably too strong, but he's best with the ball in his hands. He's not, at this point, a great route runner. He's not going to create a ton of separation downfield, but get the ball in his hands, he is excellent. I do think that Ben Johnson is going to be able to get the ball in this guy's hands.
The key for me there, the reason I'm really not that interested for 2025 is that kind of player needs target volume. And I don't think that he's headed for target volume this year without guys getting hurt in front of him. I think it'll be spread around a bit too much for us to really maximize Burden's production. But again, the spot where he's going, if you want to go with him, I think that's fine. Colston Loveland is my biggest fade among this group for this year. Tight end 12. That's a level where I'll mix him in some on a best ball team where I just want his spike weeks and I don't care about the bad weeks. I'm not going to be interested once we get two lineup setting leagues because it's a crowded offense. He's also coming off an injury that's keeping him off the field for now. I'm not saying it's going to limit his potential for his rookie season, but if it's something that even just costs him some practice time heading into that first season, the team then doesn't really have any reason to play Colston Loveland as much as possible right away. They have plenty of receivers. They have Colcom at tight end. They can let him develop at his own pace. They obviously drafted him for the long term. We all see these guys get drafted and we're like, oh, he loves them. Watch for the production right away. You don't need your rookie tight end to be a star in year one. So the fact that Loveland's going right at that fringe of tight end one territory, when I'm drafting lineup setting teams, I'm basically completely out on him.
Yeah, me too. I love this player. I want to get all my exposure in Dynasty. I'm not going to have very much of Loveland at all in redraft or best ball. Like you said, Matt, it's just tough to find him targets. The wide receiver core is crowded. DeAndre Swift is going to have a pretty big role in the passing game, I think. Cole Kmet has been a really solid tight end for the past few years now, so I don't think he's going to disappear either. Could Loveland get enough targets to finish tight end 12? For sure. Does he have the target upside to finish like tight end 6? I find that really hard to believe. And I think there's other tight ends in that range that just have a higher ceiling than Loveland, even though, again, I think he's an awesome.
I think Tyler Warren is a better 2025 bet because he's on a team that needs him more. It's easier for me to see things working out for him to get that target volume than it is for Colston Loveland. Not that I'm excited about Tyler Warren.
For sure. I think there's a path for a relatively, not easy, that's overstating it, but like Warren could get to 18, 19% of the target share in Indianapolis. I'd be very surprised. I'd be super impressed if Loveland did that in Chicago this year with the amount of target competition he has around him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you are drafting best ball teams and he slides past ADP, which I've seen multiple times, that's where I'll go ahead and take Colston Loveland and other players like that. That's a good way to get some exposure to players is if you're in a draft, even if you don't really need that position right then, but that guy is like a round plus past his ADP, go ahead and put him in there because you're paying less to get that exposure just in case something beyond what you could have projected for him happens, you're still exposed to it.
In some ways, I get why he's tight on 12 on underdog in that format where it's so backloaded and you need to have the huge scores late in the season. That's the best spot to draft Colson Loveland because there is a chance, especially with this injury he's dealing with, he's going to get off to a slow start. By November, December, he could be ranking as a top 10 tight end every week.
Detroit Lions, the team that Ben Johnson was coaching for. Now he's trying to beat them twice a year. What did 2024 look like before Detroit lost their OC?
Yeah, the Bears were one of the worst offenses in the league last year. The Lions were one of the best. They led the entire league in points scored. They were second in yards. They were second in yards per play. Actually, the Lions averaged 4.0 offensive touchdowns per game last year. That was the most we've seen by any team since the 2018 Chiefs. Lions were also first in offensive plays, which obviously helped the scoring, helped all the fantasy scoring for these guys. More plays equals more fantasy points. And of course, this was a very run-leaning offense, in part by design, in part because they were so good and leading in so many games. But the Lions were 26th in pass rate. They were 25th in neutral pass rate. They were also 25th in red zone pass rate. They stayed run heavy near the goal line, which is why David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs were able to rack up so many rushing touchdowns.
You mentioned the first in scoring. That has pretty much all of their players overrated in drafts right now, because even if we look at that really good offense, it was really good the 2 seasons before. They ranked 5th in scoring those previous 2 seasons. So those touchdowns are something to be aware of and a reason to be a little bit more wary than the market is this season. Before we get to those specific players, here's what's new. Obviously, Ben Johnson is out as the OC. John Morton is in. He was not on the staff last year, so it's a significant change. We'll see exactly what it means. I would expect something along the same lines as far as run-pass split goes, because the offensive skill players are basically the same. The biggest addition they made to that group is Isaac Tisla in round 3 as a rookie who didn't even spend that much time catching passes in college. What they did change more was the offensive line. The Lions lost Frank Ragnow, their center, to retirement. They let guard Kevin Zeitler walk. Guard Graham Glasgow is moving to center. They've got 2 new starters at guard. One is second-round rookie Tate Ratledge. The other might be Christian Mahogany, which is also what they build church pews out of, but he is a 6th-round pick from last year. They drafted 5th-rounder Miles Frazier this year. Maybe there's competition. We'll see. I don't think it's ultimately going to matter a whole lot for us who exactly wins that other guard spot. They have a plan in place to treat what they're swapping out from last year. So I would assume that the blocking will wind up good. The skill position talent has always been good. That should continue even with the OC switch.
Yeah, that's quite a bit of turnover, though, on the O-line for an offensive line that's had a lot of continuity in the past few seasons and has consistently been one of the best O-lines in the NFL. Their Ragnow loss especially is big. I mean, this guy was a Pro Bowler each of the last 3 seasons. Last year, he was second among centers in PFF grades. So I was already lower than market on the Lions offense before the Ragnow retirement, and that's only made me feel better in that conviction. The coaching change is obviously a big thing. John Morton, he doesn't have much OC experience. He was the USC Trojans offensive coordinator back in 2009 and 2010. He had 1 season as the Jets OC in 2017. So he's a big question mark after the Lions under Ben Johnson. I think he's at least a top 3 play caller in the NFL. They're going from that to a total unknown. So that's a big question in Detroit heading into this season.
And in case you're wondering, John Morton is also not former Lions wide receiver John E. Morton's. Totally different dude. Draft targets for this team, Jared, honestly, I don't have a single Lion that I'm actively targeting in my drafts right now. What about you?
No one that's like a blaring target for me. You know, 2 guys I'm drafting some of. The first is Jameson Williams. He is higher in ADP than in our rankings. He's wide receiver 25 ADP, wide receiver 29 in our half PPR rankings. He is 26th among receivers if you look at our ceiling projections, and I think that's where Jameson Williams gets exciting. Had a nice 2024 season. He finished wide receiver 25 in PPR points per game. He was even better over the second half, wide receiver 22 in PPR points per game over the second half, and that came with a role change, which I think is really important. Over his first 7 games, weeks 1 through 7, Williams had a 13.8 yard average depth of target. He had just a 57% catch rate and 21 yards per catch. So he was their downfield big play maker. Weeks 10 through 18, 10.6 yard average target depth. That's like average for a wide receiver, maybe even on the low side. 67% catch rate, still averaged 15.6 yards per catch. So he was still making big plays, but he was getting a lot more shorter range passes, catching a higher percentage of those passes. That's just important to me, especially as we get into lineup setting leagues. It's going to make him more reliable. He's not going to be a huge target share guy. There's just too many weapons in this offense. Even if he takes a step forward in target share, which I think he could this season, he's not going to be a huge target earner. But if he continues to play that type of role where he's just getting more short range stuff, more easy catches, that's going to make him a more reliable week to week fantasy play.
Yeah, he's going right at that level where he scored last year. Did some positive touchdown luck, some yardage luck. He's that kind of player that should remain well above average efficiency on the yardage and scoring front. So I'm making sure that I get some Jameson Williams just in case, especially if they do throw a few more targets his way. That could increase the production. At best ball time, we know that there is big week potential for Jameson Williams. Once we get into more lineup setting drafts, though, I'm less interested in Jameson Williams because then you do have to worry about the weekly pitfalls. He'll boom one week and then bust the next, and that's going to hurt that team more than it will best ball. I think there are plenty of other wide receivers in that range or even behind him that will give me at least as much week to week value when you balance everything out. He's also going like looking in that range where he's a half round ahead of Jalen Waddle is one specific player that makes it difficult for me to jump on Jameson Williams big time because I think the Jalen Waddle season long ceiling is more attractive than Jameson Williams is.
Totally fair. I'd say you can take them both there. That's definitely a range where I'm focused on wide receiver. I like that kind of tier. I'll take both those guys. But if you're asking me straight up, I definitely prefer Waddle. I think his target upside is just more attractive.
David Montgomery is the other Lion here that I'm not targeting, but I'm also not fading at RB23. If he does continue to get used the same way this year as he has over the past couple of years, then we'll at least get the high weekly ceiling because he's the more frequent guy near the goal line, gives us some touchdowns. We know that Dan Campbell likes him, so I expect we'll get similar usage. Also, I think David Montgomery is a fine guy to not draft very much where he's going. Not a player I'm targeting, but if I get there, and especially if I've had a wide receiver heavy start, I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll go ahead and toss David Montgomery here.
Yeah, same for me. I mean, he's definitely a guy I'm not targeting when I go into drafts, but I've taken a decent amount of him. He is RB20 in our half PPR ranks, first at RB23 ADP. And if you look at Montgomery through his 13 healthy games last year, he was RB10 in half PPR points per game. He was also RB15 in expected half PPR points per game. He scored 12 touchdowns last year in 13 games. That's obviously tough to bank on repeating, but the role, the usage was there at the goal line. Montgomery led all running backs in expected rushing touchdowns through week 14 last year before he got hurt. So, yep, part of that is the Lions scored so many touchdowns as we're expecting to regress, but they use Montgomery down near the goal line. I expect that to continue. The other thing with Montgomery, I mean, people talk about Jahmyr Gibbs' upside if David Montgomery goes down, but if Jahmyr Gibbs misses time, David Montgomery's a top 12 running back. Like, he's going to get 80% of that backfield work in an offense that we still expect to be at least a top 10 offense in the NFL. So there's definitely some contingent value on Montgomery if you get a Gibbs injury.
And whereas Montgomery's going at a fine value point in drafts, Jahmyr Gibbs, to me, is going way too close to his ceiling. I think people are ignoring that Jahmyr Gibbs's biggest weeks came after David Montgomery went down and that he spent the whole season scoring well above his usage. Now, like I said for Jameson Williams, I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the kind of player who will spend nearly all of his career scoring above his usage. But he had lower usage than David Montgomery in their shared games last year. So he has to score way above usage to get up to that RB3 level where he's getting drafted right now. I think there is much more downside to him than there is chance that he gets a lot more work, because even if we're just looking at the Lions doing things best for themselves, Jahmyr Gibbs is not built to be a workhorse running back. If they give him too much, they run the risk of overworking him and cutting into his efficiency and decreasing the edge that he does have on those defensive players. So it will behoove the Lions to keep David Montgomery involved. Even if a larger share of that work goes to Gibbs this year, I don't think that it's going to be so high that by the end of the year, I'm regretting not drafting Jahmyr Gibbs at his first round price tag.
Yeah, you're definitely the biggest Jahmyr Gibbs bear at Draft Sharks. I'm a little below. If you look at our rankings, he's 6th in overall ADP on Underdog, which is half PPR. He is 7th in our half PPR ranking. So we're a spot below ADP. I know you'd like to push him down a bit further than that, Matt. He is a scary player to bet against because he's just really freaking good. Like you said, Matt, he is the good bet to outproduce his volume throughout his career, at least for the next 3-4 years when he's in his prime. But at cost, you really need him to get more of the backfield. Like, to bet on him being as efficient as he was last year, I don't think that's wise. I think you need him to both get more work and remain way more efficient than average to pay off his costs. He's definitely someone I take from time to time because I don't want to have zero Jahmyr Gibbs, because I think there's a world where he finishes as a top 3, at least top 5 overall fantasy player. But I do think he's a bit overvalued at his ADP right now.
Yeah, I'm getting just enough to make sure that I don't have zero, but he's my least favorite pick in all of round 1 at ADP. Actually, the other guy who might be competing with Jahmyr Gibbs for that title of least favorite round 1 pick is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who we already saw the target share drop for last year. And now we're getting even more Jameson Williams buzz heading into this season. So it's possible that we shave even another percentage, 2 percentage points, something along those lines from Amon-Ra St. Brown. And his value relies heavily on that high level target share. I'm not even really all that worried about not targeting Amon-Ra St. Brown more than I am in round 1, especially because the guys around him, for best ball purposes specifically, but even once we get lineup setting too, plenty of upside to the wide receivers around him. Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, AJ Brown, Puka Nacua. He doesn't stand out to me among those guys as somebody that I see this scary finish for where I have a bad 2025 because I did not have enough Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, wide receiver 7 in ADP versus wide receiver 9 in our rankings. But the bigger difference is that Amon-Ra St. Brown is the 11th overall in underdog ADP. He's 17th overall in our ranking. So it's really just some of the running backs, like I think Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, were pushing above Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's someone I've not drafted much of at all. You look at St. Brown last year, he was 6th among receivers in half PPR points per game, but just 12th in expected half PPR points per game. He was relying on the volume, but also the efficiency. He had an 81.6% catch rate last year. He had a 10.4% touchdown rate. St. Brown's been definitely an above average efficiency player with the Lions the past few years, but those were high marks even for him, especially the catch rate. He was more like 71, 72, 73% catch rate the previous couple of years. 81.6 last year is going to be tough to repeat. When you just look at the last 2 years for Amon-Ra St. Brown, he was more fueled by volume. He had 164 targets in 2023. That was 5th most among receivers. Last year was more efficiency. The volume was still really good. 141 targets. That was still, 23 fewer than the previous season. He averaged 1.82 half PPR points per target, up from 1.67 the previous season. If you give St. Brown his 2023 efficiency on the 2024 volume, you come out to 13.8 points per game, which would have been wide receiver 15 last year. That's my concern, that his volume is not going to return to what it was in 2023. He's going to have trouble repeating last year's efficiency, and it's just going to leave him as he's going to be fine. He's not going to, I don't think he's going to pay off a late round 1 price tag.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to kill your team, but I think there's a much better chance that Amon-Ra St. Brown finishes this season as wide receiver 12, wide receiver 13, than as wide receiver 3. So I'd rather just leave him on the board for somebody else. Sam Laporta, I probably have the least trepidation of passing on among all of these Lions. He's at tight end 4 in ADP. He finished last year tied for 12th in expected PPR points per game. Even if you look back at his rookie season where he was at the top of tight end scoring, he was 5th in expected PPR points per game. So he outperformed that usage as a rookie, primarily on his touchdown luck. I don't think touchdown luck is a good bet at his tight end 4 price tag this year. I've mentioned the overall questions or issues that I have with the Lions offense. 2024 was basically a best case scenario for Lions offensive efficiency. Sam Laporta didn't benefit from it then, but if everybody's efficiency is coming down, and I think it will in Detroit in 2025, then I'm certainly not betting on high level efficiency for Laporta, who at best is probably the 3rd target in this offense.
Yeah, everything was down for Laporta last year versus rookie season. Target share down from 19.8% to just 16%. His yards per route sunk from 1.76 to 1.61. His expected PPR points per game and actual PPR points per game significantly lower than they were in his rookie season. I will point out that he had pretty big splits from the first half of the season to the second half. In his first 9 games, he was tight end 14 in points per game, tight end 21 in expected points per game. Over his final 8 games, tight end 5 in points per game and tight end 6 in expected points per game. So he got better volume and better production over the second half. I think he had an ankle injury early in the season, so that might have had something to do with it. I do think he's going to bounce back, and he's tight end 4 in our rankings, which is where he is in ADP. The problem is he's going 2 rounds ahead of Travis Kelce, 3 rounds ahead of Mark Andrews, 4 rounds ahead of David Njoku. I just think those guys are a better value, especially when you factor, Laporta, you're taking in round 5 or 6. Like, there are still really good, especially wide receivers in that range that I want to take. I'd much rather pass on Laporta in that range and take one of those older, more boring tight ends 2, 3, 4 rounds later.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing working against him. Like you said, even in the second half of last year where he rebounded, he was still just below where he's being drafted right now. And even if we look at his rookie year where he was 5th in expected PPR points per game, the guys he trailed, Travis Kelce, because of course, TJ Hawkinson, Evan Ingram, David Njoku. So why am I taking Sam Laporta 4th when I can wait and take Evan Ingram later, where I can wait and take David Njoku? I have no reason to target Sam Laporta where he's going. Jared Goff, another line that I'm not drafting, but he's QB 15, so I'm not going to tell anybody he's a bad pick at that level.
No, he's not. I think he has some regression coming as well, but I think the market has baked in most of that. The reason I don't draft,
figured it out as draft season has gone on. When drafts first started, Jared Goff was like quarterback 8. I was like, sweet. People are going to keep drafting Jared Goff up there. That's going to leave value. They have at least fixed that.
I like to think our rankings and probably some other sharp rankings out there had something to do with that. But yeah, just don't draft Goff because I don't have many Lions. And if I'm looking to stack, I'm going to stack a quarterback with some pass catchers I actually have drafted.
Yeah, and that's the way to draft him. He's going to need stacking partners to make sense. And like you said, I don't have those guys on my team already, so I don't care where Jared Goff's going. I'm just not interested. I do care about the Green Bay Packers, and they are up next, Jared. What did last season look like for these guys?
Good season for Green Bay's offense last year. They were 8th in points scored, 5th in yards, also 5th in yards per play. Those were all Green Bay's best finishes since at least 2020. Despite being a slow-paced, low-volume offense, the Packers last year finished just 26th in plays, 30th in pace. That's becoming a thing with head coach Matt LaFleur now. LaFleur coached with Aaron Rodgers for a few years, and Rodgers has always run a slow-paced offense, so it was tough to know whether it was a Rodgers or Matt LaFleur thing, but it looks like LaFleur has plenty to do with it now, because even in 2023, without Aaron Rodgers, they were 23rd in plays and 20th in pace. That's one downside of this offense, is you're probably not going to get big play volume. The other important note with Green Bay last year is this was one of the run-heaviest offenses in the NFL. They finished bottom 3 in pass rate, neutral pass rate, and pass rate over expected. As a result, they finished 5th in rushing attempts, but just 30th in passing attempts.
I like that you said coached with Aaron Rodgers as opposed to coached Aaron Rodgers, which I think is appropriate. Still no Aaron Rodgers on this year's staff. Getting back to that run rate point, like you said, last year was one of the run heaviest offenses in the league. It was out of line with what we've seen before from Matt LaFleur. If we look at last season's rushing rate, the share of the offense that was run play is 51.2%. That was significantly higher than in any of the 5 previous Matt LaFleur seasons. 41.9%, 43.4%, 41.6, 44.7, 40.3. Now, to be fair, his offenses have also trended toward running the ball more. If you look at neutral pass rate for the whole time that Matt LaFleur has been the head coach, last year was the only one that was sub 50% neutral pass rate, but looking at the numbers from his first season on, it went 57%, 56%, 55, 51, 51. So last season was probably some combo of progressing in that direction with injuries to Jordan Love and importing Josh Jacobs that I think probably gave us more running than we should expect going forward, but also might have been just another step in a shift that's more running than what we saw the first few Matt LaFleur seasons.
Yeah, really tough projection to nail down this season when you're talking about Green Bay's run pass rate. I think it's going to be really important. The one note I'll make just looking back at 2024 is that, like you said, Matt, Jordan Love missed all or most of 3 games last season. If we just remove those 3 games, the pass rate does jump from 48.8% to 52%. Now, 52% still ranks 29th in the NFL, but it's a 3 percentage point jump. So the point is they're very unlikely to be as run heavy as they were last year. The question is just how much do they, lean towards the pass?
And we'll talk about how to treat players at draft costs in a minute with that in mind. For what is changing this year, the coaching staff is not. Matt LaFleur is still there. He's heading into his 7th season. The important guys on the staff remain intact. They drafted wide receiver Matthew Golden, 23rd overall in round 1. It's the first time the Packers have drafted a wide receiver in the first round since Javon Walker in 2002. The last time before that was Sterling Sharp in 1988. So the Packers just don't like picking wide receivers in round 1. That probably tells us something about how they feel about Matthew Golden. We'll see. They also added Savion Williams in round 3. He's a wide receiver in name, might be more of a gadget player. We'll see if Savion Williams means anything for this year's team as we move through the summer and get practice reports. The Packers also let center Josh Myers walk. He got just a small one-year deal with the Jets, so it seems like probably a solid decision, even though he's heading into just his age 27 season. They signed guard Aaron Banks from the 49ers for big money. They're moving guard Elgton Jenkins over to center to take over that spot that Josh Myers vacated. The Packers ranked 7th in ESPN pass block win rate last year, but just 23rd in run block win rate. So I would imagine that they're trying to enhance that middle of the offensive line and try to help that running game that we've been talking about.
Agreed there. No key departures from this pass catching core, although they're going to be without Christian Watson for likely at least the first half of the season after he went down late last year with a torn ACL. So that opens up opportunity for Matthew Golden and the rest of these Packers wide receivers.
The first target for me among Packers, Jared, is a player that you would absolutely guess. It's Jordan Love at QB 18. He kind of instructs the way that I treat the rest of this team because Jordan Love is going so late that he's one of my favorite quarterbacks to draft. He's still going ahead or near most of his pass catching options. Whether I draft any or multiple Packers pass catchers depends on whether I drafted Jordan Love or whether I'm about to draft Jordan Love. Last year, not good. They ran the ball a whole lot. He dealt with injuries. He sprained a knee at the end of that week 1 loss to the Eagles. He also injured his groin about midway through the year, played through that one, but that was a time of year where the Packers then ran the ball even more than they already were. Like they were already running more than they had been previously. That expanded after Jordan Love's groin injury. I don't know if those two things are tied to each other, but it seems curious timing for it to not be related. I expect more passing this year. And now that Jordan Love is QB 18, there's really not a whole lot of risk to me making that bet on more passing bet.
I'm with you. Quarterback 16 in our rankings. You could even push him a few spots higher, and I think it'd be fair. Love, on a fantasy points per drop back, he was actually a bit better in 2024 than 2023. It's just he dropped back close to 7 fewer times per game. And that the increase in points per drop back was despite his rushing production being way down. Love scored 2.9 fantasy points per game rushing in 2023. That sunk to 1.0 in 2024, which I would safely assume was because of those injuries. He got hurt in week 1. That was supposed to be an injury that was going to cost him like 3-4 plus weeks. Ended up just missing 2 games. Hurts his groin again in the middle of the season. So I got to imagine that's why the rushing was down. So I think on top of the passing volume and therefore passing production increasing, I would bet on the rushing production at least getting close to what it was in 2023.
If you're looking at him at QB 18 and you're like, what's the upside? Do I get him at QB 18 and he finishes QB 14? That's not the ceiling. We saw him in the top 8 the previous season, and over the second half of 2023, Jordan Love was the top fantasy quarterback. He was scoring at the top of the position. He was putting up PFF grades and ratings that put him at the top of the position. So he was playing very well. He was producing very well. That's what you're targeting, not just somebody who is a few spots lower than he should be at market price. Jared, who else are you targeting among Packers?
The only other heavy target for me is Marshawn Lloyd, who we've talked about plenty. He is RB 61 in ADP right now. I think that's up maybe like 10 spots from where it was a couple months ago. Still a price tag. I'm definitely jumping on him. Obviously had the tough injury luck last year. We hardly saw Marshawn Lloyd at all in his rookie season. Had hip and hamstring injuries in August, missed the season opener. Returns for week 2. Plays 10 snaps, sprains his ankle, is out for another month or so. Then he needs an appendectomy in November that ends up just ending his rookie season. Maybe he's quote unquote injury prone. I would doubt it. I think the guy just had some tough luck. I mean, obviously the appendectomy is a total fluke thing. So I'm definitely willing to take any injury related discount we're getting on Marshawn Lloyd. This was an exciting player coming into the league last year. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry, 13.3 yards per catch across his 3 college seasons, ran a 4.46 40 time at the combine at 220 pounds, gave him a 93rd percentile speed score. The other big thing here, the reason I think we're both shying away from Josh Jacobs, at least one of the reasons, Matt LaFleur has a long history of committee backfields. That goes back to the Titans in 2018 when Derrick Henry just barely finished with more opportunities per game than Deion Lewis. And then in Green Bay, you had Aaron Jones splitting time with Jamal Williams when Matt LaFleur first got there. Then Aaron Jones split time with A.J. Dillon. So from 2018 to 2023, Matt LaFleur teams, no running back cleared 14.8 carries per game over that span. Josh Jacobs finished with 17.7 last year, making him a pretty obvious outlier. So I would think the plan even last year was to have Jacobs more in a committee, but Marshawn Lloyd just couldn't get healthy. So they were kind of forced to ride Jacobs as a workhorse. I think if Lloyd is healthy this season, we're going to go back to more of those traditional LaFleur backfields that we saw over the previous few seasons.
What if God just hates Marshawn Lloyd, Jared? Do we downgrade him for that possibility?
And then we're out on a guy we took at RB61, and we can figure that out.
They drafted him in round 3 last year after having signed Josh Jacobs for all that money. So it's not like Matt LaFleur inherited Marshawn Lloyd. They targeted Marshawn Lloyd at his draft price. They clearly liked the player. Last year went about as poorly as it possibly could have for him. Maybe that changes how they feel about him, and maybe Emmanuel Wilson played even better than they thought he was last year. And that factors into what Marshawn Lloyd can get. But we're talking about RB62 in ADP. It's an easy target for Marshawn Lloyd, even just as a handcuff. It was even more fun heading into the NFL draft when you could get Marshawn Lloyd as one of your last 2-3 picks in a best ball draft. That's when I was really loading up, but he's certainly still among my favorite targets in the range where he's going at this point. For the other guys, I'm not specifically targeting Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, Romeo Doubs, but if I do have Jordan Love as my QB2, Jaden Reed makes lots of sense at his wide receiver 43 price tag. Tucker Kraft makes plenty of sense as probably my first tight end at that point. Not a tight end I'm really interested in on his own if I don't have Jordan Love, but certainly makes sense as a stacking partner where he's going overall. Romeo Doubs is one of those guys that people just hate. We all know he's not an amazing player, but he just stays on the field in an offense where wide receivers don't just stay on the field. But he consistently leads their wide receivers in playing time. Matt LaFleur always talks him up in the preseason. Romeo Doubs is at least an end zone factor, and he's going just ahead right now of Jack Besh and Josh Palmer, behind Xavier Legette, Quentin Johnston, and Cedric Tillman. So Romeo Doubs is a pretty easy stack with Jordan Love for me.
Yeah, we are 9 wide receiver spots above ADP on Romeo Doubs. We have him wide receiver 56. He's wide receiver 65 in ADP. That's what I wanted to say about these wide receivers in Green Bay. They're tough because Matt LaFleur likes to rotate. Doubs is the closest thing to a full-time receiver in this offense. Outside of Doubs, there were only 3 instances last season of a Green Bay wide receiver getting to an 85% route rate in a game. And 85% is like a full-time receiver. We see plenty of receivers get well above that. 85% is not a huge number, but it only happened 3 times in Green Bay last season. So that's what makes them tough to like. That's the biggest concern for Jaden Reed. You look at his route rates, 69% last year, up from 61% as a rookie, but he just does not play in 2 wide receiver sets. That limits his fantasy upside and his fantasy floor. He also saw a target share dip last year. He's at 17% as a rookie, down to 15.7% last year, but his efficiency improved from his rookie season, 1.95 yards per route run as a rookie to 2.20 last year. That was 17th best among 84 qualifying receivers. So Reed kind of is what he is. I think his playing time is what it is, but if Green Bay throws more and Reed gets closer to that rookie target share, he could definitely pay off his price tag. He's another guy. We are a little higher than ADP on wide receiver 43 ADP. We have him wide receiver 36. The other thing not to overlook with Jaden Reed is the rushing production. He has averaged 1.4 fantasy points per game as a runner over the last 2 seasons. So in half PPR, that's like a catch per game, right? Like what would that be? A 9-yard catch is what he's giving you every week as a runner. So that's definitely not something to throw away.
And we talked about outperforming your usage with Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs. Jaden Reed's not doing it to the level of those guys, but he through 2 seasons has been an outperforming your usage player. So at the very least, we get weekly upside with him. And if you're drafting in a non-PPR format, I think Jaden Reed gets even more attractive because we don't have to worry as much about that target share that knocks him down in PPR. Dontavian Wicks, if you have liked him at any point, he's wide receiver 86 in ADP now. So go ahead and stash some and see what happens. I know he probably needs an injury, but injuries happen. So you can stick him at the bottom of a roster. And for those of you at the end of your best ball draft, like who can I get that nobody else has? Luke Musgrave is basically going undrafted, even though 2 years ago he was ahead of Tucker Kraft in that lineup, got drafted ahead of Tucker Kraft. So there's at least physical ability there if opportunity finds him. And then I mentioned Emmanuel Wilson in relation to Marshawn Lloyd. He's somebody worth sticking on a roster at the end of a couple of drafts because Emmanuel Wilson did play pretty well last year when he got time on the field, at least in part because Marshawn Lloyd was injured, and we'll see. There's at least room for him to compete with Lloyd for the role this season.
Yeah, Musgrave's a really good call. At this time last year, Tucker Kraft was Musgrave. Like Musgrave was going higher in drafts. I don't think Musgrave's going to get his job back. He probably needs a craft injury, but if he gets it, I think Musgrave's good enough to be a fantasy factor. I'm fading Matthew Golden at ADP, and he's pretty clearly overpriced based on our rankings. He's wide receiver 42 in ADP, wide receiver 55 in our rankings. It's scary to fade a first round wide receiver. That alone gives him some upside. But for me, it's the fact that LaFleur likes to rotate his wide receivers. And if that's the case with Golden, that obviously hurts. But the big thing for me with Golden is it goes back to his prospect profile. He never led his college team in catches. He had a 16% target share last year, his final college season. If you look at his ranks among 49 wide receivers at the combine last year, 31st in yards per route run, 28th in yards per team pass attempt, 28th in PFF receiving grade. I get it. You watch the films, their speed and route running in the hands are really nice at times. There's stuff to like on film, but on paper, there's nothing that makes me want to invest in this guy at his current ADP.
It's very similar to Jack Besh for me. The player is intriguing, but the market, and in this case, the market is the NFL, having drafted him in round one, I think just overrates the player. So I don't like Matthew Golden at what you have to pay to get him. And maybe Matt LaFleur likes him because Matthew Golden is what Matt LaFleur likes a receiver, somebody who's just going to annoy fantasy managers.
That makes way too much sense. I think you're onto something.
The other guy I'm fading is Josh Jacobs at his RB10 ADP. We've talked about it on here. Last year was just the second time in his 6 NFL seasons that Josh Jacobs has not missed any games. He's now going at the 2-3 turn. That's ahead of Chase Brown. It's nearly a round ahead of Breece Hall and Kyron Williams, just behind Tyreek Hill and T. Higgins. I think that Green Bay is going to throw the ball more. I don't think that Josh Jacobs is going to do as well on touchdowns this year. I think there is some injury risk. There is some luck involved in holding up to as many touches as he got last year without getting hurt. When you wrap that in with the price you have to pay to get Jacobs in drafts right now, just not intriguing for me.
Yep, I'm with you. Haven't drafted much Jacobs. He's RB10 in ADP. He's also RB10 in our ranking. So we're right there in terms of where he lands among running backs. I'm just taking wide receivers at that range. I like Tyreek Hill. I like T. Higgins. Even Devontae Adams is someone I'd probably prioritize over Josh Jacobs. I mean, he finished RB6.5 PPR points per game last year. He was good in terms of efficiency. The role was really good last year, but as we said before, it just seems like everything kind of fell into place for Josh Jacobs last year. He stayed healthy. He was able to rack up all those touches without missing any games. And then again, Marshawn Lloyd got hurt. I think Marshawn Lloyd would have played a bigger factor last year based on what Green Bay spent to get him and Matt LaFleur's history. Jacobs kind of lucked out that Lloyd just couldn't get healthy. I do think he's going to lose work, both because the Packers pass more and because I think Marshawn Lloyd's going to eat into his work a little bit.
Certainly things could fall in line again for Josh Jacobs. He's not a 0 shares player for me in best ball. So if you are drafting for volume, I would get a little bit of Josh Jacobs. But, you mentioned, Jared, where his ADP is in line with how we rank him. There are going to be players like that. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to target them. I think the key consideration there is, what is his upside? Is it RB10, but a chance that he leads all running backs if things go his way? I don't think that's Josh Jacobs. I think the upside from RB10 is like RB6. So I'm not scared of passing on the RB10 and missing out on the RB6 versus the other guys that I'm drafting in that range.
Yeah, I think the downside's pretty scary too when you look at what happened the last time, just a couple years ago when Jacobs racked up all those touches. The following year, he misses 4 games. Yards per carry plummets to 3.5. Tough to predict that happening, but it wouldn't surprise me if he took a big hit in terms of efficiency after handing all those touches last year.
Minnesota Vikings to close out this division. What did 2024 look like for this team?
It was good offense despite having Sam Darnold at quarterback. I think surprised a lot of people how good this offense was with Darnold. I think that speaks to Kevin O'Connell quite a bit, who we'll get to. The Vikings last year, they were 9th in points scored, 12th in yards, 12th in yards per play. The Vikings have now been top 12 in total yards in all 3 seasons under Kevin O'Connell. They've also been top 9 in points scored in 2 of O'Connell's 3 seasons. It is interesting. They shifted a bit more toward the run last year. The Vikings did. You look at 2022 and 2023, mostly under Kirk Cousins in those seasons, 64 and 63.6% pass rates. Those were both right near the top of the league. Last year, they dipped to a 56.6% pass rate. That was 16th in the NFL. Interesting, though, that they were still 6th in neutral pass rate. I do think some of the pass rate decline was the fact that this team was just so good. They got out to so many leads that let them run the ball more. But even with the rookie quarterback they're going to have this season, I do think you'll probably see a bit more passing from the Vikings in 2025 than 2024.
And that QB change is the biggest difference between last year's team and this year's team. The head coach is still the same. It's the 4th season for Kevin O'Connell. in Minnesota, his fourth season with Wes Phillips as the offensive coordinator. So you like that continuity, especially when you're switching quarterbacks yet again. Sam Darnold is out because he's now cost a bunch of money. JJ McCarthy is in because he now has two functioning knees. Minnesota, of course, drafted McCarthy 10th overall last year ahead of Bo Nix. So they like JJ McCarthy. We'll see exactly what that means for his NFL outlook. They also acquired Jordan Mason for the backfield. It was a pick swap, a 5th-round pick down to a 6th-round pick in this past draft. The Vikings also sent a 2026 6th-rounder to the 49ers in the deal, and they extended Jordan Mason for 2 years at $12 million, $7 million guaranteed. That's a pretty good sum of money for a number 2 running back. We'll talk about Jordan Mason's role and whether he makes sense in drafts later on. The Vikings also let center Garrett Bradbury walk. They replaced him with longtime Colt Ryan Kelly on a 2-year deal at $18 million. Kelly's coming off injury last year, so we'll see to make sure that he's all the way back to full health heading into the season. The Vikings paid a lot to get 27-year-old guard Will Fries from that same Colts offensive line. That's interesting. They drafted guard Donovan Jackson late in round 1 from Ohio State. Like we talked about with the Lions, there's a rebuild of the interior of the offensive line. This line ranked 2nd in ESPN's pass block win rate last year, 15th in run block win rates. Looks to me like they're trying to enhance their run blocking, especially up front. The Colts on that front ranked 4th in run block win rate as a team last season, and PFF graded Will Fries as the best run blocker on that Colts team the year before. Ryan Kelly was the 2nd best graded run blocker on that Colts offensive line. So the Vikings appear to view these two guys as run blocking upgrades.
Yep, and I think the Jordan Mason move also kind of speaks to maybe wanting to run the ball a bit more. He is a between the tackles power type back. I don't think we're going to get back to the 63-64% pass rate Vikings with McCarthy this season, but maybe a bit more passing than we got last year. The other potential issue for the Vikings in 2025, which we'll get to when we talk about targets, is Jordan Addison looking at this potential 3-game suspension for his DUI, which was well over a year ago. It seems like by August we'll have an answer on that, but that's definitely a question looming over this team right now.
Like the Lions, Jared, these Vikings have no player targets for me. Now, I'm not saying that I'm out on Justin Jefferson. At wide receiver 2, he's certainly somebody that I'm going to mix in because he's Justin Jefferson. But as the number 2 player overall, I don't even have him ahead of CeeDee Lamb. So you can't specifically target a guy that's going 2nd overall. That leaves no Vikings as guys that I'm really going after.
Yeah, I have 2 lukewarm targets, like guys I'm definitely willing to take. The first is JJ McCarthy, and he's getting to a price where I might end up getting priced out. He's up to quarterback 16 in ADP. He is our quarterback 19, so he's already a few spots above where we have him ranked. I will say, if you look at the ADP, there's like 4 or 5 quarterbacks in that range that are all going in the same round. You could get McCarthy at quarterback 20 in plenty of drafts. That's when I want to take a shot on him. It starts with the situation we talked about with O'Connell. The Vikings top 6 in passing yards and passing touchdowns in all 3 of Kevin O'Connell's season. You look at fantasy production, only 5 teams in the league have totaled more quarterback fantasy points than the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell over the last 3 seasons. It's just been a good offense for passers, and that obviously is helped by the fact that you have Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, just a really strong pass catching trio there. In terms of McCarthy, the player, obviously we haven't seen him in the NFL yet. He was off to a good start in training camp last year, had a good preseason opener as well, was a low volume passer in college at Michigan for run heavy teams, but he was super efficient, 68.5% completion rate, 8.7 yards per attempt over his final 2 college seasons. He can also run a little bit too. This guy ran for 742 yards and 8 touchdowns over his final 2 college seasons, posted a sub 4.6 second 40 time at his pro day, a really strong mark for a quarterback. I do expect him to give us some added rushing production as well this season.
Good situation he steps into, probably a fine player, QB 16, not an outlandish price, also not a player that I'm targeting at cost though. Can he match Sam Darnold's QB 8 in points per game last year? Sure, that's possible. Sam Darnold also needed a 6.4% touchdown rate to get there. He only gave us 4 top 6 weeks among 17 games. So Sam Darnold way outperformed where we drafted him last year, way outperformed his previous, but also wasn't really a fantasy difference maker. And if we look at current pricing on JJ McCarthy, he's more than a half round ahead of Justin Herbert. We've got Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Trevor Lawrence, all basically a round plus behind him. We've got, for best ball purposes, Tua to go with my Jalen Waddle shares on my team. So just overall, JJ McCarthy is not a guy that I'm interested in.
Yep, all fair. Again, I think he's getting up there in price, so we'll see where that goes over the next month or so. I don't want to be in on Aaron Jones, but he's RB28 in ADP. I just think it's not going to be hard for him to return value there. We have him RB24 in our rankings. There's definitely reasons to be concerned. He's 30 years old now. He did post a career low PFF rushing grade last year, and the Vikings did make that move for Jordan Mason. I am definitely expecting Aaron Jones to lose rushing work to Jordan Mason. Last year, Aaron Jones had 15.0 carries per game. That was a career high. He was between 11.4 and 12.9 carries the previous 3 seasons. I think he's going to get back into that range, 11, 12, 13 carries per game, which is a decent number still. I think he's going to continue to control pass catching work in this backfield. Aaron Jones has 50 plus catches in 3 of his last 4 seasons, including 51 last year. He was still good as a pass catcher last year, 9th in PFF receiving grade among 37 qualifying running backs. And Jordan Mason, he has 14 catches across his 3 NFL seasons. Could he be a pass catcher if he needed to be? Probably. But I don't see a reason for the Vikings to use Mason over Aaron Jones on passing down. So I think Jones is going to be a big enough part of this offense, especially in passing situations, to pay off that price tag, which to me is just too cheap.
Yeah, we don't like when running backs lose touches, but I think losing some carries this year is probably a good thing for Aaron Jones. He's just not built to be a workhorse. He's 30 years old. The Jordan Mason trade is the Vikings saying we need a better RB2 because we need to make sure that we don't overwork Aaron Jones. We need somebody better than Ty Chandler to share that backfield with him. If you look at our rankings, as you already spoke about, rankings versus ADP, it looks like we're saying target Aaron Jones. He's RB22 in our PPR rankings versus RB28 in drafters ADP. He's RB24 in our half PPR ranks versus RB29 on Underdog. I'm with you though. Not somebody that I'm going out of my way to get, but you don't really need to be super in on Aaron Jones for him to make sense at that price. He's definitely not overpriced at those ADPs that are outside the top 24, no matter where you're drafting. He might wind up underpriced. RB20 last year in half PPR points per game. I think he can do that even with ceding some carries to Jordan Mason, because I think we could get better efficiency from Aaron Jones with those potential upgrades to the offensive line, with him not getting run as much. We've seen plenty of injuries in Aaron Jones's past, so I'm sure that he was banged up Aaron Jones even when on the field at times last season. We saw a couple of games where he was limited in playing time, even though we didn't get a clear injury. So I think Aaron Jones is fine. I think his market price is probably a little bit under where it should be. Like you said, though, not a guy that I'm going out of my way to draft. And Jordan Addison, kind of similarly, obviously, he's not similar in that he's toward the beginning of his career, and now he's got the extra risk of the court case, but also going at the bottom of wide receiver 3 territory. That's fine. I'm not targeting him, but I'll go ahead and mix in Jordan Addison at that cost.
Yeah, I think Jordan Addison's an excellent player. He does have the suspension risk we're still waiting to fight on. He does have that Justin Jefferson guy on his same team, which is going to prevent Addison from ever being the alpha in his passing game. He is wide receiver 36 in ADP, wide receiver 37 in our rankings. We have him projected to miss the first 2 games right now. So we're kind of hedging. If he gets suspended based on the league's policy, it's gonna be a 3-game suspension. So we have him projected for 2 right now, hedging a bit, saying there's still a chance he escapes, but he's more likely than not going to get suspended for those first 3 games. Now, especially if you're getting a lineup setting leagues, like missing the first 3 games is not a huge deal, right? Like it's easy to find a fill-in for those first 3 games. And I do think Addison can return value once he's on the field. This guy had a 17% target share as a rookie that improved to 20% last year. And if you look at the final 8 games of last season, including the playoffs, 22.5% target share. And then that was even when TJ Hawkinson came back from his knee injury. So Addison is an ascending player. His ceiling is capped at some point because he's not going to out target or out produce Justin Jefferson. But in a good passing game, the number 2 receiver can still be a top 30 fantasy play for.
And it sure looks like by the time the season starts, we should know whether he's missing those games or not. So it's nicer to have missed games that we know are going to happen as opposed to somebody who gets injured later in the year and misses games we couldn't have seen coming. Fades for me, besides JJ McCarthy, among these Vikings, TJ Hawkinson at tight end 5, like it's a fair price for him, but he's not going to lead the tight ends in scoring. He's got a Justin Jefferson problem, just like you said. And Hawkinson, even more than Addison, needs the target volume to pay off. If we look at the stretch where he was most productive since joining the Vikings, it was the stretch where Justin Jefferson was out with that extended hamstring injury. So if you want to get some TJ Hawkinson in case Justin Jefferson goes down, fine. But I think tight end 5 is too much to pay for that possibility, especially with the brand new quarterback adding another question.
Yeah, Hawkinson's big 2023 season came on a 23.7% target share in his 14 full games. You look at last year, 16.8%. Now he's coming back from the ACL, so you got to give him some credit there. He's not going to get back anywhere close to 23.7% with a healthy Justin Jefferson. And when Jordan Addison is on the field now in his third season, I think Hawkinson is going to be the pretty clear number 3 option in this passing game. He's fine where he's going among tight ends, but again, it's the same kind of argument as with Sam Laporta. I would just rather wait a round or two for Travis Kelce, wait 3 rounds and get David Njoku, who I think is going to put up similar numbers. So Hawkinson's a fade for me.
If you think Hawkinson is attractive, if you're like, yeah, but he's a high floor tight end, I think who you actually want is Evan Engram, because it's the same kind of profile where he needs target share, but he's actually on a team where he might get it. We could see Evan Engram lead the Broncos in targets this year without anybody getting hurt. He could just beat Cortland Sutton in targets. That is absolutely not going to happen with TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota.
You're always finding a way to get Evan Engram into the conversation.
Hey, us old guys got to stick together. Jordan Mason is the other Viking that I am fading. I didn't want him really before. He's RB 31 now. He's like 2 positional ADP spots behind Aaron Jones. The market is absolutely insane on Jordan Mason right now. There is just no way that he gets enough work to support that with a healthy Aaron Jones.
Mason needs to outcarry Aaron Jones to pay off that price tag, which is possible. Is it most likely? I think definitely not. But even if he does outcarry Aaron Jones is not going to go away. He would remain involved. And 2, Aaron Jones, again, he's going to be the pass catching back. There's very little pass catching upside with Jordan Mason. To me, RB31 just doesn't properly factor in the floor and ceiling. I think the ceiling is RB25. Best case, he takes over as the lead runner. But I think it's more likely he's a fringe flex play. He gets enough carries to be a fringe flex option, and then he obviously has the handcuff upside. But RB31 is just a crazy price on Mason.
Right. The upside is clearly as a handcuff in case Aaron Jones gets hurt, and RB31 is just too much to be paying for that eventuality. I think Jordan Mason is honestly one of the worst values on the entire board right now.
He was cheaper earlier on. I got some shares then, but I haven't drafted him in a month or so.
If you want to see where Jordan Mason and the rest of these guys rank for your format, head to draftsharks.com now. If you haven't done so yet, go ahead and sync your team to automatically import all of your specific scoring and lineup settings. You will get rankings that are custom fit to your draft. Plus, you'll get the industry's most powerful draft assistant to deliver updated pick recommendations the whole way. If you want to see how that draft war room works, we have videos to show you that on the website. We have our what used to be called our perfect draft series, now our draft guide series for all these different formats, running and still coming out on draftsharks.com now. So, if you play like a 10-team non-PPR league, you can check the site and see exactly how the draft war room guides you through from every pick in that draft. No matter what format it is that you're drafting, Draft Sharks is your unfair advantage.